Hello, Black Eagles. Welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast. We are previewing yet another European game today, and as you can see, I had to make a little bit of tweaks since we exited the Europa League. So for the first time, we are debuting our new look for the Europa Conference League, and and joining me today is Macdara Ferris from Extra Time in Ireland to talk to us about our upcoming opponents for the next two Thursdays. On Thursday, we are away in Ireland, in Dublin, against St. Patrick's. Macdara, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your insights on what for us, I think for most of us, is going to be a little bit of a mystery of a team.
Yeah, delighted to be here. And it's a big game in Dublin on Thursday. There's a Europa League qualifier for Shelbourne. They're away on Wednesday. Shamrock Rovers are playing in the Conference League. They're away in Kosovo. So this is the one game that's in Dublin this week with the visit of Besiktas to play St. Patrick's Athletic. So yeah, it'll be a pretty big game on the sporting headlines this week in Ireland.
Do Irish clubs regularly make it out of the qualifying rounds to the league stages? Because I have to be honest, I can't recall. Maybe Shamrock Rovers, or I can't really recall last time I saw an Irish club in the league stages.
Yeah, so Shamrock Rovers they were the first Irish club to make the group stage of the Europa League. So that was back in 2011. Mm-hmm. Dundalk made the Europa League group stage in 2016 and also in 2020, during COVID. And then Shamrock Rovers twice in the last 3 years have got to the Conference League. And Shamrock Rovers, they did quite well. They got out, they made the knockout phase and played in February. But your opponents this week, St. Patrick's Athletic, haven't made the league stage or the group stage before, but they do have a pretty good pedigree in Europe and have gone deep in Europe without actually making the group stage. So they've got good experience within their team, but are waiting to make the step up. And there's a realization that this week is a difficult fixture for them if they're to go any further in this competition.
And how is it seen to have a club of Besiktas' size coming to Ireland? I'm not sure what kind of opponents Irish clubs usually face in these qualifiers, because obviously in the last couple of years the English clubs haven't been having to play qualifiers anymore, for the Champions League at least. So there's less of the top 5 really big clubs in the qualifiers for the most part. Would you say Besiktas are one of the bigger clubs to come to Ireland in the last couple of years?
Yeah, definitely. The way the league phase and the Conference League, Shamrock Rovers played Ghent and Djurgårdens from Sweden, so not like big European clubs, but not big heavyweights. Last year, Shamrock Rovers played Chelsea, but that was in Stamford Bridge. And then when Dundalk played Arsenal, that was behind closed doors, so a 2020 fixture. So there wasn't any fans being able to see that match. But so the Besiktas coming would be a pretty big team. I don't know, have you an idea of how many fans might be traveling from Istanbul for the game?
I think for these European matches, there's a lot of diaspora Turks in across Europe, and they're definitely going to want to attend this game. I have some friends who live in Glasgow, and they really want to go. But unfortunately, it's either you have to get the tickets in Istanbul physically, or you have to get them physically in Dublin. So it's really difficult for people. You know, it's risky to go on a trip and then maybe not get the ticket. So it's a little bit. It's always, the ticket organization is never the best. I have to say. So, but I definitely expect the away section to be sold out. Can you say the same for the home section? Is there a lot of excitement around this match about Beşiktaş coming to Dublin?
Yeah, so it's maybe worth saying that St. Patrick's Athletic play. They're a South Dublin club. They play in Richmond Park, pretty close to the city centre, but the stadium is quite small and it doesn't meet the requirements for the third round of the qualifiers. So they played their first 2 qualifiers. I was at the first qualifying round. They played Hegelman from Lithuania. They won 1-0 at home and 2-0 away. So they played their first 2 qualifying rounds in the Conference League in their ground. But in the third qualifying round, they need to move this to Tallaght Stadium. So that's a UEFA stadium that can host the Conference League league phase. So it's a 10,500 seater stadium. So the Besiktas fans will be in the south stand behind one of the goals. That holds it has 2,000 seats. I don't know how many tickets will be available. And then the main stand is already sold out for St. Patrick's Athletic. The singing section is the north stand, so behind the goal. That's pretty much sold out. I think they only had 300 tickets left this morning, and that holds over 2,000. And then the east stand, they're selling tickets for that. But I think it'll be close enough to sell out on the day, which will probably be about maybe 8,000 tickets, because they'll need to have segregation between the home and away fans. But so there is a bit of excitement, a little bit of disappointment for St. Patrick's Athletic fans that they can't play in their home stadium. They have a really good record in Richmond Park. I have it here. They played 21 home games in their stadium and they've won 11 of them. But when they get to this phase, they need to go to Tallaght Stadium, and they've played 6 games there and they've only won 1. Drawn 1 and lost 4, and that tends to be not necessarily that it isn't their home stadium, but they're at the third qualifying round where there's a really good team coming, or a playoff round, which they got to last year. So I think it's probably to do with the fact that the opposition is quite good when they're playing in this round, when they have to play in Tallaght Stadium. But there's also good interest because, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, they haven't had a particularly good season. We play summer football, the season starts in February, and they haven't been doing particularly well. So the European fixtures are really big for them, and it's also very big prize money for League of Ireland teams when they go, compared to the prize money is really, really important for a League of Ireland side. So yeah, there's a lot of anticipation for Thursday's game.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you mentioned it that the league campaign right now is disappointing, and we talked a little bit off air about it already, and you mentioned that they're currently in 6th position out of 10 teams in the League of Ireland. So how important is a European game at this stage for them? Is it more important for them to focus on the league and perhaps qualify for Europe next season, or do you think that they're going to put a lot of emphasis on the importance of this game as well?
Yeah, so they put a lot of emphasis on this European campaign, because to get through these 3 rounds in Europe, they're pretty much close to €1 million in prize money, and that's very important. Like, they're unbeaten in their matches so far in Europe. They won the first round home and away, and then they won in the second round against an Estonian team. They won at home 1-0 in a game that they dominated. They should have won by more. They had something like 30 shots in the game, but only scored very late, and then they drew away to go through. There's a realization that this is a very difficult fixture for them to, if they were to win this fixture, this would probably be one of the best ever results for a League of Ireland team in Europe, particularly over 2 legs. Mm-hmm. And probably the fact that they're away second, so it does make it difficult from that point of view. But so there's probably a realization within the fan base that they're not going to go much further. I'm sure the manager Stephen Kenny and the players aren't thinking that way. They'll want to try and get a result and go through to the next round. But what's happened is, with Europe coming in, they've actually got a good run of form. So they've played 26 of the 36 games, and they're sitting 6th, as you said. They're about 5 points off. 3rd place is guaranteed Europe next year, and depending on who wins the cup, if you win the cup, you're in Europe, or if one of the top 3 win the cup, then 4th place gets into Europe as well. So so they're actually unbeaten in the last 8 games. Mm-hmm. So unbeaten, the 3 wins and the draw in Europe. They've had a couple of scoreless draws in the league. They also won a cup game 8-0 against a non-league team, I should say. And then they won at the weekend 2-0 away in Waterford. So I think probably the European run has helped them find a bit of form, because at the start of the season, they were one of the favourites to win the league. Mm-hmm. They invested quite heavily over the winter and brought in some really good players into their team. And they've been definitely a disappointment in the league this year, but are still very much in the hunt for Europe, but not to win the league title. I think they're probably 16 points behind at this stage with 10 games to go. So I think that'll be certainly difficult. But I think if they can carry the form through that they've brought within Europe, I think they'll be in a good place to get European qualification next year, which, as I said, is very important. And they're also in the cup because St. Patrick Athletic did very well last year. They got to the playoff round of the Conference League. As I said, Shamrock Rovers went all the way to the knockout round. Shelburne, who were the current champions, they went 2 rounds last year. So what's that meant is Ireland has actually moved up in the UEFA rankings into the top 32. And so the cup winners this year will go into the Europa League qualifiers, and then that gives them the back door. If they lose in the qualification, they'll drop into the Conference League. So it gives them an extra match, whereas you play in the Conference League, and if you lose, then you're out. So Pats will want a cup run as well, although they've got a difficult enough draw in the next round.
Okay, so a couple of things from what you said there, a couple of scoreless draws you mentioned. I think you also mentioned that they struggled finding the goal in the qualifiers against, was it against Kaiju, maybe?
Yeah.
And
Estonia,
yeah, so they scored a late goal there, and then they got a draw away. So it kind of sounds that they are struggling for goals a little bit, or am I misinterpreting that?
Yeah, they said the 8-0 was a non-league team, so to be expected. One of the signings that they made over the winter was a striker called Aidan Keena, and he scored 6 goals in the league, but not really. He hasn't done super well. I think there was a lot of expectations on him, and he hasn't done particularly well. So there's a lot of, maybe not pressure, but they have one of the star players the Pats have is a player called Mason Melia. He's only 17, and he's because of a lot in the past, a lot of our players, when they were below 18, they would transfer to academies within England, within the Premier League. But after Brexit, players can't go to England, as in workers can't go to England or the UK until they're 18. So what's that meant is players are actually staying in Ireland longer. They're staying and playing in the League of Ireland. And Mason Melia is a real star. He made his debut at 15 for St. Pat's. He played a lot last year as a 16-year-old and did very well. So Tottenham Hotspur have actually signed him for next season for a record fee. They've signed him for, it's pretty much, I think it's 1.9 million as a base fee. When he turns 18, he'll play out this season with St. Pat's, and then he'll go to Spurs next year. And the 2 million fee is, to say, a record for a League of Ireland, and that's the base fee with appearances. There's a sell-on clause. So he's a real star. He did really well last year in Europe. So he scored 7 goals. He scored again at the weekend, and he's probably the player that Besiktas will want to watch. But yeah, they have been a bit light in goal. They like to play with either 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, and they play with 2 wide players. And one of them, Zach Elbazetti, has kind of struggled with injury, and he hasn't been as available as much. But it probably just hasn't clicked for them up front. But yeah, that's been the difficulty for them this season.
Yeah, sounds similar to Beşiktaş's problems. They really have some issues up top as well. They're essentially wingless at the moment. That's one of the big pressures that's been put on the president, is that really didn't get a winger for the games against Shakhtar, which was a big disadvantage there, and still no winger has been signed. They're apparently close now to signing Ndidi from Leicester City, but again, that's not a winger.
Yeah.
It's not a winger. So St. Patrick's, I'm curious to see how the players that are a little bit maligned by the fans, how they will perform against St. Patrick's, because Beşiktaş have a real issue on those wings. Of course, they have other players who can make the difference, like Tammy Abraham, Rafa Silva, hopefully Orkun Kökçü if he's fit. So we talked a little bit about what the team's looking like, and you highlighted Mason Melia there, the young starlet of the team. The coach as well, I believe, a bit of a club legend, if I'm not mistaken. If I read that correctly, at least, I should say.
Well, He's a very experienced coach. So he's the previous manager of the Republic of Ireland national team. So he started his coaching career very young. So he's won trophies at a whole host of clubs in Ireland. So Dunfermline, he went to Scotland at another stage and was manager at Dunfermline, but he won trophies in Ireland with Longford, with Derry City, with Bohemians, and he was very successful at Dundalk. I spoke earlier on about Dundalk making the Europa League in 2016. That was the second time a League of Ireland team, and Kenny was manager there, and they did quite well in that they drew with AZ Alkmaar. They won another match in the group stage. So he won, I think, 4 titles in 5 years with Dundalk before he became the national team manager. Now he has had difficult times at certain clubs. He was manager at Shamrock Rovers in 2012, and it was not very good. He didn't see out the season, and he was manager with the national team, and we didn't qualify for a tournament. Now, there wouldn't necessarily be an expectation that Ireland would qualify for the World Cup, but with the expansion of the Euros, we'd be there or thereabouts, but we weren't successul. There's kind of various reasons. He was manager during COVID, which was a really difficult time, and all sorts of things happened. When the Irish national team play, we actually play in the National Stadium, the Aviva Stadium on Lansdowne Road, and it tends to be a big event. The average attendance for League of Ireland games is probably about 4,000 or 5,000. Small figure. So we don't get the crowd sizes of the league games that you would have in Turkey, or we'd see, in the major leagues around. So actually, when Ireland play, we get quite big crowds. We get 40,000. When the big teams come, we get sellouts. So it was difficult for us during COVID when we were playing behind closed doors, because we didn't have the support, the vocal support that we would get. And we would also, the Ireland team would travel away in quite big numbers. So that probably didn't help him at that stage. So he was in charge for 2 qualifying campaigns, and then they didn't renew his contract. And they brought in an Icelandic manager to take over, and he's done okay. So it was a big thing for St. Patrick's Athletic to get Stephen Kenny. He came in midway through last season, and it was very big sporting news, because the talk was that Kenny might maybe get a manager job in the UK, or maybe look to get another. He did talk to some other national teams, because he has that experience being successful at club level in Europe, and then being an international manager. But St. Patrick's Athletic, they have an owner who's put quite a lot of money into. Gareth Keller put a lot of money into the club over the last decade, and he's given him, I think it's a 5-year contract. So he came in just before the European campaign last year. They were the cup holders, so they started in the second qualifying round of the Conference League, and they won that round. They won the third round, and then they got to the playoff round where they played in Istanbul against I won't pronounce it right. Beşiktaş. Yeah. So he came in just before the European campaign, when they hadn't been doing very well. They'd sacked their manager. They got to the playoff round. They won the first. They drew the first leg in Dublin 0-0. And only lost away 2-0, which was a good result. There was, when you're down to just a one game, you think, actually, maybe over 90 minutes we can get a result. Yeah. They did, but went close. And then in the league, they were brilliant. They won their last 9 league games in a row. They suddenly found themselves in the title race. It was quite a bizarre title race. There was 5 clubs involved going into maybe the third last game of the season. So they were very much involved. They won the last 9 games of the season to finish third, and that was very much to do with the new manager coming in, a couple of players that he brought in. He's a very good man manager, so that's why there's been the surprise that actually they haven't kicked on this season. But maybe it's like last year, they're coming to form at a good time for Europe, and maybe a good time to finish, even if they're outside of challenging for the league this time around.
And you mentioned that he likes to play 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 formation, but what type of football does he play? Does he play a high pressing game? Does he prefer to retain possession? How do you expect St. Patrick's to line up against Beşiktaş, and what type of mentality do you think they'll start off the game with?
Yeah, they're definitely a possession-based team. They look to play the ball, and that is his philosophy. And even when he was national team manager, there's always a discussion, oh, we don't have the right players. A lot of our players are playing in the Championship, not that many players playing in the Premier League. But he was very much, his philosophy is our players are good enough to play the ball. So it's not a long ball. He plays, I mentioned, with wingers with speed. So he has Simon Power on one side, who is one of the quickest players in the league. I don't play FIFA, but his speed numbers seem very, very high. People were quite excited when he came back from England. And the Jake Mulroney on the other side again, who's very, very quick, very skillful. But they'll look to hold the ball. They certainly won't. They will press, but they're quite confident in how they will play the ball, and they have some very skillful players who can hang on to the ball even under pressure. So it certainly won't be long balls over the top. It's a good option. Mason Melia, while he's quite young, he's physically quite developed and he can run in. But if Besiktas push up on the space behind, they might look to exploit it. They have a player called Chris Forrester, who's very much the number 10. And he can go long very accurately, but also find pockets of space that he will work in the midfield. He's a very difficult player to get the ball. He scored the winner in the last round in the home game. In the 91st minute, there was a big scramble. There was a shot. The keeper pushed it out, and he got the ball very close to goal, and he took 3 touches to take it around a couple of players around the goalkeeper and just toe poke it home. A player who can find space and time when there is no space and time, and he managed to do it. So I think while they haven't got to the group stage, as I said, they've been very successful in Europe in the last 4 seasons, going a couple of rounds. I think that's to do with the style of play. And even under previous managers that played that 4-3-3, a couple of holding midfielders who'll sit in front of the back four. And I think that suits playing in Europe, where you need to retain possession. The difficulty for League of Ireland teams is the really big clubs, and Besiktas will be one of them. If you make a mistake, they'll punish you, and that's probably tends to be the difference. League of Ireland clubs have done very well against teams that are ranked below them or at the same level, and the difficulty has been playing against the higher ranked teams.
Yeah. And what would you say is something that Beşiktaş should be looking to exploit? What are their weaknesses? Where can Beşiktaş hurt them?
Yeah, it's interesting because you guys are only just back in season, so you've played a couple of friendlies, you've played in Europe as well, so we're well into our season, so we're pretty fit. So we're probably hoping to exploit maybe a lack of fitness from your squad, although there's a recognition that the level of player that your team has at international level, they don't really switch off. They're not going to have been sitting on the beach for the last couple of weeks, and I know in terms of a pre-season training camp, you guys will have done that as well. So, but probably there is that maybe that physicality. I think we probably see that at the level of players that you have, they're both quick and strong. And maybe some of our players mightn't be as, Pats are full time. They actually train out at the national team training facility in Allenstown. So they're very good training facilities. They are full time, but it's that comparison, that one-on-one speed. Maybe that your players can within the rules of the game push a player aside, that kind of physicality, and so that's probably something that maybe you might look to exploit. And potentially the wing backs or the full backs, it's a back four. I think the centre halves are very good. The club captain is a player called Joe Redmond, who's very impressive, a real leader on the pitch, is a really good defender. He scored the late goal in the second leg last week to take the game into extra time, and then Jake Mulroney got a goal draw the game so that they won 3-2. But it's maybe the fullbacks, maybe you might be able to exploit. That might be something that you guys might look at.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds interesting. Thank you for all your insights on the team then. What I find very fun about the Europa Conference League, and I'm a very big fan of this tournament, because I've said this in the past, I'm also a huge fan of the Europa League actually. I think the Champions League, obviously, that's where everyone wants to be. You get the big money, but it's always the same 20-odd clubs. And it's really, the tournament doesn't start until the group or the league stages are over, and then the big boys start to decide amongst each other who takes the prize home. And really, the Europa League has kind of evolved into something similar like that as well over the last 15 years, with the emphasis being put on Champions League football if you win the Europa League. And personally, as a lover of European football, one of the things I love most about the European games is when you have these away games against clubs that you wouldn't always come across. You know, not your Lazio Romas or your Sevillas or Manchester United or Paris Saint-Germain, but actually the somewhat more obscure teams perhaps. But we had 6 years ago, I think we played in the Faroe Islands against Tórshavn. I think those are really the European trips that, for me, that's what European football should be, kind of, if that makes sense. You know, instead of having 7 or 8 teams from England in Europe, I'd much rather have matches against maybe number 3 in Ireland or the number 2 in Iceland or something, or Hungary, those types of fixtures. That's one of the big charms in the Conference League. But with that, of course, comes that you have away trips that maybe aren't always aren't the big city trips, so to speak. And of course, Dublin is a big city. Ireland is a popular destination for tourists. But still, I do think it's fun to maybe get a couple of tips for the fans who do decide to go to the away game. If there's anything fun that you can recommend them doing on match day.
Yeah, I think one of the big tourist attractions is the Guinness Brewery, which is very much close to the city centre. So I'd recommend that. It's probably only about 1 kilometre here from my house. Sometimes I can smell the brewing, depending which way the wind is blowing. But that has a bar, the Gravity Bar, which is a great view out over the city. So Dublin isn't very high rise, so it's actually one of the tallest points to look out over the city. So if people are interested, it's well worth going to. And my advice would be just to book the ticket online, because then you get to skip the queue. And actually, you could go from there to the stadium pretty easily. So as I mentioned, this game is going to be played in Tallaght Stadium. So it's about a 45-minute trip on the light rail, the Lewis, out from the city centre. But that light rail goes very close to the Guinness Brewery. So you could go and sample a pint of Guinness, see one of the main tourist attractions within Ireland, and then hop on the light rail and go out to the stadium. So yeah, I just wanted to remind people it is a trek out, so just to give yourselves enough time if people are going out. A lot of people will go to Temple Bar if you're looking for somewhere else to have a drink. It's very touristy, and you'll pay quite a lot for a pint there. If you want to maybe to go somewhere more traditional with Irish bars, Marion Row, which is beside St. Stephen's Green, is probably much better to go in. The price of a pint is much more realistic, and you'll get a feel for what just what an Irish pub is like. And if you're looking for something cultural to do, the Trinity College, the big university, is very much right in the city centre, and you can walk through the campus. It's built like the late 1700s, so it's a beautiful walk right through the gate, right beside the River Liffey. And if you wanted to go to one of the museums, the Book of Kells Museum is a pretty good one to go to as well. So there's this museum which is quite interactive. So that's a couple of tourist things if you want to do. Maybe somewhere to avoid Temple Bar if you want to be not amongst all the other tourists that are in Dublin. So yeah, the St. Stephen's Green area is nice to see as well.
Okay, Macdara, thank you very much for your insights on the team, and of course for the trip, for those of you who decide to make that trip. to Ireland. Is there any social media that you would like to plug? Where can people find you online?
Yeah, maybe just Extra Time. So at Extra Time News is our extratime.com website. If you have a look, we cover Irish football, both the League of Ireland, the international level. So yeah, happy if you guys want to point in that direction. But yeah, really enjoy the chat, Can. Delighted to be able to hopefully give your fans a flavour for what they'll see in Dublin on Thursday.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a very highly recommended trip to make, I think. It's maybe not that, like, sometimes you have these European trips, like to Napoli, for example, where you really have to tell people, be careful. There's like roaming hooligan crews that are trying, just trying to pick off people off the street. So you need to be careful with that kind of stuff. Doesn't sound like anything of that is going on in Dublin.
No.
So
yeah,
very amicable atmosphere, hopefully.
Yeah, I think they may advertise to say if you're going to the stadium to travel out on a specific tram, a couple, and they'll have the police, but it's pretty low key, and if trouble won't come looking for it if you're not looking for it, if you know what I mean. I think people enjoy their trip, maybe on the football field as well as off the football field. We'll see how Thursday's first leg goes.
Yeah, and as always, of course, be respectful for the people where you visit a city. Always be respectful for people anyway. It doesn't matter whether you're visiting for another city or not. Just treat people how you would like to be treated, of course. Macdara, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for watching, of course, for this new preview with a little bit of a preview as well for our new look for the Conference League. Hopefully we'll get to use it a few more times this season than we got to use the Europa League team. So thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you can be notified of any future streams and videos. And don't forget to leave a comment and maybe hit that join button or join us on patreon.com/Beşiktaş podcast. Thank you. Bye-bye.